you have competent attorneys on both sides are going to contribute to the drafting. So when you talk about who's going to put it together, probably the better question is that who is going to initiate the drafts? And that's why I don't get too bent out of shape about it. If the other side say, I wanted to go ahead and draft it, or they want me to draft it, depending on, if it's a really, really small business, then you kind of have to worry about incurring a lot of attorney's fees for your client. And so it's easier to have the other side do the initial part of the work since that's more. But both counsel, if they're competent, are going to be involved in the drafting and the amending the draft so that both sides will be happy with and protected with the final contract that's supposed to be drawn up. So that's one of the things, and obviously the initial contract, there's due diligence language that would be in the agreement so that if all of a sudden the finances turned out after the prospective purchaser looks at them and go, wait a minute, this isn't really, what was being presented to me. And it may not be some type of fraud. It may just be kind of a misunderstanding, or that they say numbers don't lie, but numbers can be interpreted differently by different people. And so the seller may say, these numbers indicate that the business is thriving. And the buyer may say, wait a second, I got a different view of this. So you have that due diligence period, and that language has to be put in with pretty great specificity to make sure that the client is protected. You have bill of sales for any type of tangible personal property. You have language in the documents in regard to goodwill of the business. You may have terms in there regarding about the employees. You may have terms regarding if the owner is going to cut and run once they're done, or if they're going to be involved in the business somehow. That all needs to be in there. If there's real estate, you need to have a real estate contract. You need to have all the closing documents. May or may not have financing, depending on how the deal gets cut. So that all gets incorporated to it. You have transfer of the sales of shares or membership interest when you're talking about an LLC. And depending, that's a lot of that is circumstance dependent on how involved that may be. And just to give you an example, I talked about membership interest or stock. If you have one person that basically has all the ownership interest in the company, it's relatively easy to come up with that. If you have other members, there may be rights of first refusal, so you may have to go to those persons before you ever contract with anybody else and say, I want to sell my stock, or I want to sell my membership interest. This is, what I'm planning on selling it for. I can get it on the market. You want to buy it. If you don't, then I'm going to go to a third party and we'll see what we can do. So typically that's in there. There's just kind of a great deal of variables that go into figuring out what documents are necessary. And that's why you may be the best business person in the world, but you may not really know what's going to protect you legally to get out of that business, to sell that business and make as much money, and to limit whatever liability you may have towards the other side. And that's what the attorney's for. So it's definitely worthwhile on the sale of a business, even small businesses, because my fees are done hourly, but the amount of hours it's done to work on the sale and purchase of a small business, just by the very nature of it, is much cheaper than it is in bigger businesses. But the bigger businesses usually have more money to pay the attorneys, or the prospective purchaser is going to make more money once they buy it. So they understand the stakes are high and you have to have an attorney. So that's why it's a good reason to, and why we're doing this interview, to tell people that when they're thinking about selling it, they really should go see an attorney that works in this area.